Spies in the United States have a poor reputation, whereas James Bond and John Steed are cool in England. American secret agents are generally dumb bumblers like Maxwell Smart and, Bill Cosby. We can't take the concept of a good American spy seriously because they've done their job far too well. If you don't believe us, check out these 6 real-life U.S. espionage operations that make 007 look like a novice. Number 6. The FBI trained Alaskan men to go Red Dawn on Soviet invasion forces. Since the end of the Ice Age, Alaska has been fighting its own Cold War, which it has failed to thaw out. The territory's understanding of icy warfare and its proximity to the Soviets made it a crucial strategic site for the U.S. during the world's longest nuclear chicken game. The territory was a major headache for the country. It was impossible to fortify such a large area, but it could not be left unprotected. What would stop the Russians if they crossed the Bering Strait into Alaska? The U.S. decided to train a crack squad of bear-hunting locals while simultaneously solving the problem and launching what may have been a pioneering reality television show. Between 1951 and 1959, the U.S. government gathered individuals from all walks of life and told them they would be joining a counterinsurgency force that would operate in the harsh wilderness in the event of a Soviet invasion. Instead of encountering bears or moose, any invaders would be met with Alaskan insurgents. The memo outlining the desired profile of recruits was the most problematic aspect of the entire Arctic A-Team. The inventive descriptions are like something out of a federal Mad Lib. They're looking for a who's also A and hunts with A. Although it is uncertain whether the FBI discovered its one-armed bear tracker, declassified documents reveal that at least 89 persons were trained to conduct operations against the Soviets in the Alaskan tundra. They were chosen for their wilderness experience and then put through training in Seattle's urban jungle. If you're wondering whether any of the chosen badasses are natives, the answer is yes. It was the 1950s. It was unmistakably the 1950s. The final step was to divide the men into groups, each led by a civilian leader codenamed Principal, as in, and Gene Hackman as the principal, who would assign missions and hopefully wear an eye patch. The communist invasion never occurred, but the government did go to the trouble of concealing caches containing survival and combat equipment throughout the country. It's unclear how many of these caches were set up, but they're most likely still buried somewhere, ready to convince an Alaskan logger that he's trapped in an RPG game. Number 5. The CIA steals and returns a Soviet satellite without anyone noticing. There was a furious contest to be the first to the moon before the U.S. shoved a gigantic middle finger with a flag on top, and the Soviets were winning. Indeed, the Russians were so proud of their early achievements that they took one of their Lunik Luna modules on a multi-nation demonstration tour. The CIA was naturally interested in Ms. Soviet Space Glory 1958 when she arrived in the United States, so they broke into the exhibit for a private show. They realized at this time that, holy shit, the Soviets had sent the genuine thing, not a papier-mâché model or whatever. The CIA, however, was not satisfied with just one show. They required images. They trailed the module across the country like desperate groupies, only to discover it under Soviet observation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. However, they did learn that Luna would be moved by truck to a train, which would then be transported to the next city. The CIA devised a scheme that was half Breaking Bad, half Austin Powers, seeing this as their last chance to achieve what they desired. The CIA devised their plan by placing the module on the last truck to leave the exhibition. The truck was stopped at the last feasible turnoff, a canvas was draped over the crate, and a new driver took over when the coast was clear. The first driver was just confined in a hotel room for the night. Whether it was a Bates Motel or a room full with enough hookers to put the Red to bed, we know he didn't depart till the next day. In the meantime, the CIA techs got to work. They smashed open the 14-foot-high package to dismantle and then reassemble components of the Luna, all while taking a ton of photos. They began at 7:30 p.m., and by 5 a.m. the Luna had been transported to the rail yard by the original driver, with 2 hours to spare. The Russians had no idea their property had been out all night with strangers. The daring operation gave NASA important knowledge on the Soviet space program, which they utilized to build ultra-accurate props for the film set of the moon landing. Number 4. The U.S. Army lifts off a top-secret Soviet gunship from the middle of the desert. The MiL Mi-25 Hind D, also known as the Russian helicopter, like the Lunik module before it, was a piece of equipment that U.S. intelligence sorely wanted to see. The Soviets had learned their lesson by the 1980s, and weren't exactly leaving any models lying around, but Libya was unconcerned. After playing with a Soviet helicopter export model in 1987, they left it lying about. The United States of America had its chance. It would only require the threat of a huge international incident if their agents were discovered. Libya had abandoned the helicopter on Chadian soil. Fortunately, Chad's leadership chose to cooperate and allowed the U.S. to enter and remove the machine. Unfortunately, hostile Libyan soldiers were still present in the region, and they would have objected, with gunshots, to the U.S. seizing their military hardware. Abandoned or not, if the Soviets had learned that America was adding another item to its things discarded by the USSR shrine, they would have been outraged. As a result, the CIA and the Department of Defense teamed up to devise a sophisticated plan. They'd sneak in at night and steal the chopper while no one was looking. That was the end of it. Trial runs were held in New Mexico, the Libya of the Southwest, after American choppers were reinforced to sling-load such a beast. They thought the helicopter weighed 17,000 to 18,000 pounds. During the operation, the squad had to dodge the Libyans in a tremendous sandstorm that threatened to sabotage the entire mission. Even then, the helicopter made it through without the Libyans seeing. It was loaded into a heavy airlift jet and flown to the U.S. for the vehicle equivalent of a butt probing. Number 3. Howard Hughes and the CIA team up to steal a sunken nuclear submarine. Major diplomatic debates about the creation and possession of nuclear weapons are ongoing in the 21st century. Back in 1968, when the Soviets lost 4 megaton nuclear bombs in the Pacific Ocean and handled it like a piece of loose change fell down the side of their seat, attitudes were a little more easygoing. They decided the superweapons were fish bait after months of searching and left a possible mushroom cloud to marinate at the bottom of the ocean. They reasoned that if they couldn't find it, no one else would. And then the U.S. did, of course. The missing weapons were discovered roughly 1,500 miles northeast of Hawaii, but retrieving the corpses was another story. To do so, they went to the Bond Villains School of Engineering, most likely in one of the wicked states such as Florida. They devised the ridiculous plan of utilizing a big claw and concealing it in a submersible barge with a retractable roof. This is the kind of scheme that ends with Superman punching you in the face. This device would be enormous. It would be impossible to conceal from Russia, and keeping this operation hidden from Russia was crucial. The U.S. didn't want to appear overly dependent, so they enlisted the services of Howard Hughes, a master engineer and the type of eccentric maniac who could pull off such a bizarre idea. It was a deep-sea mining operation, according to Hughes and the U.S. There was no serious suspicion of government participation, but the media ate it up. The Hughes Glomar Explorer successfully recovered a section of the submarine in 1974. The entire sub was not recovered since the machine behaved in the same manner as all good claw games. It dropped half of the prize on the way up. We should all be grateful that this didn't happen in 2015, since there's only one billionaire eccentric who could pull it off, and he'd use the gigantic claw to hurl Mexicans across the border. Number 2. The NSA taps Soviet communication lines at the bottom of the ocean. Long before the latest charges of pervasive surveillance over to the public, the NSA was dancing classical tap. In today's world, tapping communication lines is a euphemism for listening in. Still, during the Cold War, it meant lowering a massive metal tube, or listening pod, into communications cables even if they were at the ocean's depths. Because it was the early 1970s, the Russians must be up to something. A Soviet communication cable running along the ocean floor between 2 facilities off Russia's eastern coast was detected by U.S. intelligence. The Soviet Navy barred any foreign navies planning a tour through the region. The NSA honored this by sending submarines beneath the lines and dropping out divers with massive recording pods. Every few weeks, they would retrieve the pod, listen to Russian moms chastise their sons for never phoning, and then drop another one off to continue recording. The Russians never expected anybody other than Cthulhu to access their cables. A remarkable quantity of sensitive material was transmitted through them. The NSA restrained laughter during all of the uncoded tactical, political, and personal calls that passed along the ocean floor. In the 1980s, NSA employee Ronald Pelton had had enough with Russian Ramblings FM being the only radio station in the office, and he disbanded Operation Ivy Bells. He betrayed the United States by selling the knowledge to the Soviet Union. Both sides were generous in their responses. Russia handed him $35,000, and America sentenced him to life in prison, although he was released today. The equipment is currently displayed in a Moscow museum as part of the prestigious Seriously WTF America show. Number 1. The CIA parachutes 2 men into the Arctic Ocean to investigate an abandoned Soviet base. The fighters become colder as the war progresses. Even the Arctic Circle wasn't exempt from the Russo-American pissing match in a war that was light on shots but high on pranks. The U.S. sought intelligence from an abandoned Soviet research station floating in the Arctic Ocean in May 1962 under the cute moniker of Project Cold Feet. Add in reports of paranormal activity, and you've got yourself a survival horror video game. The base was called a drift station because it was stationed on a floating chunk of ice. The station had to be evacuated unexpectedly when the runway became impassable due to shifting ice. The Soviets reasoned that since the ice was breaking up, it would be safe to let the sea consume the station and its research. Because traditional air transportation to the island was unfeasible, the Soviets were convinced that no one would attempt to reach it. They made grave errors in their assessment of American intelligence. With a borrowed polar navigator from Pan Am guiding the way, 2 U.S. operatives were dropped by parachute onto a crumbling block of ice just because the Soviets might have left a sock behind. 4 days later, the pair was picked up by a plane fitted with a skyhook, an experimental winch mechanism that used a balloon. Despite the terrible weather conditions, they were winched to safety with 150 pounds of essential equipment, 100 of which were probably Russian pornography stashes. The operatives were rewarded with some medicinal scotch as soon as they were secure. The team discovered surprising evidence that the Soviets were doing ice research on the Soviet Ice Research Station, which couldn't have been very successful given that they were still stuck by it. The United States obtained important information about Arctic anti-submarine warfare techniques, but the Soviet Union also learned something. The CIA was capable of anything. Conclusion. What do you think about these missions by the U.S.? Let us know in the comments below.